Do you feel like you're barely keeping your head above water? That no matter how hard you try, meaningful progress remains out of reach? Heather gets that. She battled an eating disorder for years before seeking help. Now in recovery, Heather is here to tell you that positive change is possible even when it doesn't feel that way. Join her as she shares openly about her struggles and small triumphs. Fair warning though, Heather doesn't hold back. Her candid story may trigger some. But for those wanting honesty, hope, and healing, this is 1% Better with Heather. The information and stories shared on 1% Better are based on host Heather's personal experiences with eating disorders and mental health challenges. Heather is not a licensed doctor, therapist, dietitian, or other health professional. Her advice and opinions should not be taken as professional medical advice. Please consult your physician or a qualified health provider regarding any medical or health-related issues. 1% Better also contains descriptions of eating disorders that may be triggering for some listeners. Discretion is advised.
Hey there, my little gaffers, and welcome to 1% Better with Heather. Today I have a special guest, edWarriorMom, as she's known on TikTok. For the next couple episodes, edWarriorMom will share how she got pulled into this eating disorder hell. No questions off limits. She will speak about her daughter and their experience with the eating disorder recovery system, how this disease affected her family. She will also be discussing her faith in a higher power and how that helped her get through this eating disorder hell. It takes a brave person to come onto a worldwide podcast and air your dirty laundry, so to speak. I applaud her for this. Now, without any further ado, here is edWarriorMom. Hello, my little gaffers, and welcome to 1% Better with Heather. Today we have a special guest. edWarriorMom is here, as she's known on TikTok, so make sure you go follow her. Welcome, edWarriorMom. Would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Hi, Heather. Yes, I'm edWarriorMom on TikTok, but my actual name is Kendi, and I know that's hard for people, so I tend to introduce myself as Wendy with a K, because that seems to make a little more sense to folks. And yes, I'm a mom. I have a husband and 3 kids, and just trying to kind of get by in this life, and excited to be here today to talk about a really important topic.
Well, thank you very much. I want to thank you again because I said this in the intro, but I really want to get it across. It takes a strong person to come on a worldwide podcast and air your dirty laundry, so to speak. I cannot thank you enough. This is how we make change, and I really applaud you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to tell our story. I strongly believe that what we go through in life is not without purpose. And, by sharing our story and our pain and our victories, I think it can only help other people.
So let's get into it. Let's just dive right in, right? Feet first.
Okay.
So explain to me how you got on this eating disorder hamster wheel of hell.
Well, first I would say kicking and screaming is how we got on it. Our story began about 3 years ago when our beautiful, intelligent, athletic, nobody like her, 17-year-old daughter at the time started struggling with an eating disorder. And we were blindsided. I mean, we knew something was going on with her, but this was the last thing that I expected for her or for our family. I've been a worrier, not to be confused with warrior, that came later, but a worrier my whole life. And when you're a worrier, you have this kind of mental list that you keep of all the things that could possibly may go wrong in your life. And even that list didn't have this on it. That's how kind of far-fetched it seemed to us. And now that we've had all of this time, 3 years, to reflect, it wasn't so far fetched. I mean, we've learned so much about her perceptions of herself, childhood experiences that impacted the development of this disorder, and just how it can develop over a very long period of time. And the other thing that we learned was that there is a typology for anorexia specifically. Heather, I don't know if you have heard this or know this, but it reads like highly intelligent, type A personality, high achieving. I mean, so far it's like a LinkedIn endorsement, right? Like, who doesn't want to be all of those things? Anxious, and then a super feeler, which is different from being sensitive or emotional. It is, someone who feels very strongly but doesn't necessarily know how to regulate or manage those emotions. So for us, that was like check, 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 right? So I don't know, do you resonate with that list, Heather, in your experience?
Well, besides the highly intelligent, sure.
Well, I think I've learned over time that a lot of people do that a lot of people adhere to that kind of typology. And so we also learned very quickly over time that there are so many other kind of related factors at play outside of just what you can see and eating and body image and those kinds of things. I mean, we're talking anxiety, we're talking depression. And while it wasn't the case for us, specifically, there are things like OCD and personality disorders and trauma. All of these things kind of work together in a very nefarious way. So, back to our story, finding out about her struggles was really a significant turning point in our lives. And we began this now 3-year journey of figuring out what the heck is going on and supporting her through sickness and in health and sort of kind of health, and then 2 very different but equally as difficult admissions to eating disorder treatment programs.
Okay, so let's get in the DeLorean, go back in time. Take me to the point where you saw, oh shit, this is more than maybe wanting to get healthy. This is now an addiction.
Yeah, and I think I would say in our experience, it all happened very slowly. It wasn't sort of just this bombshell thing that happened, although she did tell us that it was happening. And I knew immediately, like, life was never going to be the same. I didn't think it was insignificant. But I think, we immediately got her the help that we knew how to get her: a therapist, a dietitian. And we spent probably 7 months doing this. It's going to be okay. No, it's not going to be okay. It's going to be okay. No, it's not going to be okay. As she sort of slowly declined, both physically, but also in the way she was isolating her, her behavior in terms of interacting with the family, anger, and just general, I don't know that I knew it was depression at the time, but general depression. And I think we probably would have continued on that same path had we not had professionals in our life who said, hey, I think she's tanking, and it doesn't feel like it's going to get better. It feels like it's just going to get worse. And so now is the time to intervene and get her a higher level of care. We had no idea what higher level of care meant in that moment, but we're just taking things on recommendation of people that we trusted, and certainly knew that at 17, we had some opportunities that we might not have once she turned an adult and, was no longer living at home. So we took action and got her into a residential treatment program.
At 17. So Just a little backstory on your daughter. Was she an athlete? Was she really out there, like with the people? She had a group of friends.
Yeah, I mean, I think, when it goes back to me saying we were blindsided, I really felt like our whole lives were a good kind of protective factor for something like this. She was an athlete and in a sport where strength and, even brawn in some situations is an asset. We're not talking dancing or gymnastics where you hear a lot about disordered behaviors and pressure to get smaller and smaller. She had, a decent group of friends. I think she felt her whole life that she struggled to make deep and meaningful connections with people. So while she had people to hang out with, I don't know that she felt that she had really strong bonds with any of them. And so, and also in our home, always hindsight is 2020. I think there's a lot of things that we would do differently, but I do feel like we felt like we were present and supportive parents, that we had a good relationship with food and our bodies and the way that we talked about those things at home. And so she was, in my mind, somewhat insulated from the kinds of pressures and influences that I hear some young people talk about that find themselves in, struggling with an eating disorder.
So do you mind me asking, what sport did she play?
She still does, actually. So she played soccer and has played since she was a little kid. And, an interesting part of our story is that she was already signed to play college soccer at the point that we were making the decision to get her into a treatment program. So it was a little bit of a challenge along the way to think about taking her out of school, taking her out of her sport, knowing that we had this thing coming up that was really big in her life and big in ours. And so it actually was another, I think, reason why we decided to take action at that point. I think in our minds, we're going to take care of this. We're going to get her some help. We have this window of time, and then, life is going to move on down the road, which wasn't exactly how it happened, by the way, but that's what we thought at the time.
So so now I understand. With her playing soccer, yeah, you kind of got to be a wall at the end of the day. Like, you need muscle, you need to be fit, you need to be able to take a hit. I give it up to soccer players. I give it up to you being a soccer mom. I'm not standing out in the rain watching soccer. But
It's miserable.
No, man. No, thank you. But yeah, like, is that, if you're comfortable answering, is that rampant, like, in this sport with an eating disorder?
I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, I know one professional soccer player who has talked about eating disorder in her past. And beyond that, I don't hear about it at all.
Wow. Yeah, like, I guess because I come from the figure skating community, so you always have to be the size of your pinky, right? And that was never me, right?
Right.
I'm an Amazon. I'm 5'10". I grew out of being a champion going to the Olympics when I was 5 because I was already too tall.
Right. So I would say, even with her sport and everything else going on, and you hear this a lot, I think it was really challenging to get her in a place where she knew that she needed to get better because she got a ton of positive reinforcement. And as she lost weight, more people complimented her. And, I have a hard time with that because knowing what I know, I feel like we don't comment on people's bodies, period. But 5 years ago, I wouldn't have thought twice about complimenting somebody on how they looked. And so I don't necessarily blame people for doing that because they had no idea what's happening behind the scenes, right? We live in a society that glorifies skinny, and we're conditioned to be that way. So it was really difficult to kind of reconcile those two things. I remember at one soccer game during warm-ups, one of the other parents came over to the sideline and she said to me, what is she doing? She looks incredible. And now, nothing against her. She's one of my closest soccer mom friends. She had all good intentions, as I've said before, but she had no idea. And I burst into tears immediately. So she had an idea right after right after we talked that day. But just that over and over and over again until you get to a place where people are like, oh, yeah, this isn't great. And at that point, you're really struggling, and something else has to happen to fix it.
So did her coach teammates come in and talk to her? Like, do you know, like, has she shared that with you? Like, did they come in and do like what I like to call mini interventions? Like, hey, maybe you need to like bulk up, or you're kind of taking this to the extreme here?
Yes. So I have a long time relationship with her club soccer coach, and we had numerous discussions between the two of us over time just about how things were progressing. I was very careful not to talk, like I never used the term eating disorder in the early days, but he knew something was happening. And so we talked about it. And I was just very open and honest with the people who had influence over her in her life, in addition to me. And I think that was one blessing over time, is that I was able to get, some support for her in many different ways. And, that even transitioned into her college soccer experience, which I know we're not there in the story just yet, but we were able to really work together to navigate a really difficult situation. So while people don't always know how to deal with things, I have been very blessed to have people who've come straight to me or come straight to my daughter and tried to deal with things head on.
So your daughter's getting accepted to a college for soccer. There's a eating disorder going on. She needs help. What's that conversation like? Like, is she getting scholarships? Is like, are you worried like this is all going to tank? Is she freaking out like, there goes my career?
She was not freaking out much at all, which at this point, it was more us. And I don't know what it was, but I was very mindful of, we're going to deal with the here and now. Like, whatever happens down the road, we will figure it out. Right now, want to get you into this program, want to get you healthy, and then we'll see what comes next. And she really did go through a time during the treatment experience where she wasn't sure whether she was going to even be able to get back to soccer. I think she realized, how entrenched her thought patterns were, and her motivations and connections to exercise were with soccer specifically. So she had to really do a lot of soul searching around what comes next when and if I do get healthy. So that was a really, challenging thing for all of us to think that through and sort of ride the wave of it may not happen the way we thought life was going to happen.
So she's 17. I'm going to assume there's a family discussion. Is she going to an inpatient? your life now, as you know it, is on hold. And she's on board. Let's go. There's no kicking, screaming, changing your mind every 5 seconds. Because I know the switch, I always call it the switch. I'm sick, I'm healthy. I'm sick, I'm healthy. I'm sick, I'm healthy. Right? Was there a lot of that?
There was. I mean, there were numerous discussions, particularly with her dietitian, to sort of pave the way and to normalize the thought process of maybe this is what we need to do. And she would always be open to the concept. But then we'd be in other discussions and she would be talking about, getting a job. And I would be like, well, you probably can't get a job if we're going to go to treatment. And she would say, yeah, I'm not doing that. so there was sort of this back and forth. And I think when push came to shove and we had done an assessment, they had a bed for her, she went. I mean, she went willingly. She had the mindset that, I don't want to do this, but I need to do it. And, maybe it will help me get my life back and be able to do the things that I want to do. So there was no dragging her into the process. But I would say, again, we really didn't know what it was going to be like. I honestly thought we would go to this treatment center for, a couple weeks and she'd come home. I had no idea what we were about to get ourselves into. And I think that was God's protection for me specifically that I didn't know, because if I knew all the details, the timeline, I probably wouldn't have done it. And then we would be in a different situation than we are today.
Okay. So I really appreciate your openness and talking about this. We're going to stop here. Tune in to episode 2 to find out what happens at inpatient. And it only takes 1% better every day.
That's all for this episode of 1% Better. To continue the conversation, head over to our website at www.1percentbetter.ca, where you can access more stories and resources. We'd also love it if you subscribed and left us a review on your favorite podcast platform. And remember, friends, progress takes patience, perspective, and sometimes a little help from people who get it. So be kind to yourself and others as we work to get 1% better every day. We'll see you back here next week.